Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is our Birth Story Friday. We'll be sharing Madeleine's birth story, which was an induction with an unmedicated hospital birth. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit Podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is our Birth Story Friday. We'll be sharing Madeleine's birth story, which was an induction with an unmedicated hospital birth. In Madeleine's story, she developed gestational hypertension towards the end of her pregnancy, which required a medical induction. Roxanne, can you share a little bit more about what gestational hypertension is?
Of course. So gestational hypertension is hypertension where your blood pressure is 140/90. This should develop after 20 weeks gestation. So if it happens before 20 weeks, this is when it would be considered chronic hypertension, and likely you may have blood pressure issues after pregnancy that will need to be managed. But if it happens after 20 weeks, it's likely gestational hypertension. And in order to be diagnosed with gestational hypertension, you need to have a blood pressure that is above 140/90 on two separate occasions, at least 4 hours apart. So most of the time you will have an elevated blood pressure at one prenatal appointment and then again at a subsequent prenatal appointment, and then that is what rules you in for gestational hypertension as a diagnosis. Normally, the recommendation is an induction sometime between 37 and 39 weeks, kind of dependent on your provider and what they kind of choose as the guideline, or when it develops. For some people, you will not develop gestational hypertension until you're closer to 40 weeks, and then that is when they would recommend induction. They will monitor baby with non-stress tests throughout your pregnancy once you do have that diagnosis to make sure that baby is not being stressed in the womb. This is where they place you on a monitor with an ultrasound and a contraction monitor to see what baby's heart rate is looking like, hopefully without any contractions happening, but they would monitor for that. And then they're looking for certain things happening in the heart rate to tell them whether or not baby is doing well or baby potentially needs further evaluation. In Madeleine's case, there was a need for further evaluation in her last appointment, and then that went to a BPP, or a biophysical profile. This is an ultrasound where they look at baby. It's on a scale of 0 to 10. Each one gives you 2 points. There are 5 factors, one being a non-stress test, so Madeleine already had that. And then the other factors are things that they're looking at with baby. So the amount of amniotic fluid, if baby's having certain movements, and then also breath sounds. So the best you can get is 10. And any time that's over 8, so 8 or more means baby is doing well, is a good score. Anytime it's 6, this means that baby is likely fine, but requires further monitoring, potentially redoing the biophysical profile in 24 hours, or potentially looking at moving towards induction, depending on other factors. If it is 4 or below, this is likely baby is not doing well and needs to come out sooner rather than later, and moving towards an induction at this time is usually recommended if labor has not started on its own already. This is normally done also if you pass that 41 weeks mark, just to make sure baby is doing okay, because our amniotic fluid volume does get lower after 37 weeks, so they want to make sure that baby is going to be fine while we wait for labor to happen on its own. With gestational hypertension, the risk of it is that it can progress to something called preeclampsia, and this is a more complicated disorder of pregnancy that you have not just an elevated blood pressure, but it's also involving bodily functions such as your liver or your kidneys, and there are certain symptoms that you need to be aware of to look for, especially if you have that gestational hypertension diagnosis. And this includes blurry vision or spots in your vision. Pretty much just any changes in your vision from your normal would be concerning. Anytime you have a headache that is not relieved by any sort of Tylenol, any sort of pain relief is not making that headache go away, even like drinking fluid. Any pain in your right upper quadrant, so this is where your liver is located. So anytime you're having this pain in your right upper quadrant that does not seem to be going away and it's not really coming and going, it's just like kind of constant. Because sometimes you'll have pain there just from your baby kicking you or the way baby is lodged into your ribs. But when it is a constant pain, that is concerning. And then epigastric pain. So this is like pain in the center of your chest around where your esophagus is. This similar to heartburn, but a little bit more painful. Those would be reasons to reach out to your provider to see if potentially your gestational hypertension, either you are newly developing gestational hypertension that's progressing to preeclampsia, or your already present gestational hypertension is progressing to preeclampsia. They used to say swelling was also a symptom, but that's no longer a symptom of preeclampsia for diagnostic purposes. But if you start noticing one day you have zero swelling and then the next day you are like a balloon, this could be concerning, and reaching out to your provider could be beneficial.
Let's take a quick break to share about our birth story sponsor, Baobei. Baobei is a perinatal company that intentionally designed support wear for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Baobei was founded by a physical therapist and creates support bands, leggings, bralettes, and other clothing items to support your entire perinatal journey. I loved wearing Baobei throughout my pregnancy, especially for daily wear and for my workouts. Their maternity belly support leggings and shorts were my favorite to wear for my workouts, especially once my belly started to get big in the third trimester. I found that the belly support was the right amount of support and not compressive at all. I love to pair the leggings with their bralette that I used during my birth and now postpartum for daily wear and easy nursing. I love to invest in clothing that I can use both during pregnancy and after too.
I have also loved the leggings during this pregnancy, but have always been a big fan of the Pro Bump band to support my belly and manage my pelvic girdle pain, especially my SPD with this pregnancy and my previous.
Baobei is one of our favorite maternity and postpartum support wear brands. We are so grateful that they have graciously sponsored our birth story podcast episodes so you can hear real birth stories to learn from as you prepare for your own birth. Head to baobeibody.com and use code MamasteFit for 15% off your order. Thank you, Baobei, for supporting us throughout our motherhood journey. And we have Madeleine here to share her hospital birth story with an induction and an unmedicated birth.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Madeleine. So tell us your story. How did you prepare for your birth? How was your pregnancy?
So my pregnancy was good. I didn't really start preparing for birth until I decided I wanted to have an unmedicated birth. And as far as like preparing for my birth, I really didn't start preparing until probably second trimester when I started talking to people that had had unmedicated births. And that's when I made the decision to do that. And so I really kind of dove into, researching. That's when I hired you, Gina. That's really what I started doing is researching. I took y'all's course, which was amazing because it felt really unbiased. It was just really informative. So just talking basically about like the risks and the benefits of certain decisions that you might make in birth. And I really liked and enjoyed that. And then just mentally preparing. I don't know how many birth stories I listened to of all kinds. I'm trying to think of the podcast that I listened to that had a ton of birth stories on it. I listened to, C-section stories, home birth stories, induction stories, just anything that I could listen to and get my hands on, I did. And that's pretty much how I prepared for birth. And my pregnancy was really good. Obviously, it ended a little bit complicated just because I had to be induced because of high blood pressure. I think that probably happened because there was a lot of stress going on in my life involving friends and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it worked out the way that it should have. So it was great.
So you had to be induced at the end. How did you feel about that? Did your provider really walk you through kind of your options with induction? Did you feel confident that induction was the best decision for you?
Well, when I first got the news, I felt like kind of a gut punch. I was like, gosh, my plan is going out the window. Immediately just didn't feel confident that I would be able to get the birth that I wanted. You hear a lot of traumatic stories when it comes to inductions that end in, 56 hours labor that end in a C-section. And so I was just convinced that that was going to happen to me. I remember texting you, Gina, and being like, I don't know what to do. And you were like, well, induction isn't a bad word, you can still have the birth that you want. It's just going to look a little different. And after that kind of calmed me down a little bit. And then, my provider kind of talked about what that would look like for me. And she mentioned like a Foley bulb and stuff like that. And so I just kind of embraced it and knew like, this is what I need to move forward with for my health and for Arthur's health. So I'm just going to have to embrace it and, kind of prepare and hope for the best.
So how was the induction? Tell us your birth story.
So the induction ended up being great. I was having to go in to see my provider twice a week to have NSTs because of my high blood pressure. I was at one during 38 weeks, and I guess he wasn't moving around a lot on the monitor. And so they were like, well, let's do an ultrasound. And he didn't pass one of the biophysical profile things. They said he wasn't practicing breathing. They didn't catch any of that during the ultrasound. So they were like, well, he's fine, but we are going to go have a baby today. And I was like, okay. I just remember saying to my midwife, I was like, but I haven't showered. And she was like, okay, that's okay. And so they just sent me straight to the hospital, and they did once I got checked in, she came and did the Foley bulb, which I was really scared about. I had an IUD placed like a couple years before, and it was like the worst pain ever. But Heather at Triangle Physicians for Women, she's the one that did it. And she was very gentle, very kind. And honestly, I was like, that's it. She was like, yeah, it's in, you're good. And so it was literally nothing. And they just kind of let me hang out for the night. They gave me an Ambien that didn't work, so I didn't really sleep. But the next day is when things kind of got rocking and rolling. Then I think the Foley bulb's supposed to fall out on its own, but mine didn't. So my nurse ended up pulling that out and said then April, the other midwife came in to break my water. And said I was like 4 centimeters and 70% effaced. That's when things started like really going. Before that, I would feel some contractions, but I was able to talk through them and everything. But once they broke my water is when it really started kind of coming to a head. And I remember that's kind of when you came in, Gina, and I remember seeing you get your camera out and stuff. And I was like breathing through a contraction. And I think you looked at me and you were like, how are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. And I just like started crying. I just felt like all these emotions building up. I did feel scared. I felt really scared that I wasn't going to get the birth that I wanted, but you kind of talked me down from that. And that's kind of when we started using some comfort measures. I remember the first one you brought out was the heating pad, which felt amazing. But the nurse came in like 10 minutes later, and she was like, you can't use this. And she unplugged it. She just like unplugged it out of the wall. We were like, okay. I didn't have any back labor. It was like all in my front. And so Stuart would like hold my belly up during some contractions, which helped too. But then it got annoying. I remember that's when I decided I wanted to get in the tub. Like it was just getting kind of intense. And you filled the tub up and it felt so good. And then the nurse came back in and said, that's too hot. She turned on the cold water. So I mean, it really was a great experience, but there were just like moments where my nurse kind of like, when you are in labor like that and it's unmedicated, y'all know you go into like a different world. Like there's no other way to describe it. You just feel like you're in a different dimension. And so to have things like that kind of interrupt it can be really mess with your head. But once she left and you got the water warm again, I was able to like get back in the zone and like work through those contractions. But I do remember hitting transition, and that's when I panicked. I felt like I panicked. Y'all were like, you were fine. Like you were acting fine. But internally, I was like freaking out because that inductions, you hear about how long they take. And I was like, there's no way it's this intense already. There's no way this is transition. That's what I was thinking in my head. It can't be this soon. Like, why is this so intense? I have hours and hours and hours to go. And so I was like getting in my head. And that's when I begged for the epidural. But the nurse said, Madeleine, if you want the epidural, you have to sit still. And I was like, well, never mind. I can't sit still. No, there was absolutely no way. But that's when we got out of the tub she did offer something to put in my IV, and I accepted that, but it did nothing. It just kind of made you not panic, I guess. I didn't feel as panicky, but I was also probably already through transition. That's probably like why the panic went away. Yeah. And then I was like, I feel like I'm pushing during contractions. And the nurse was like, well, don't push too soon or your cervix will swell. And then left. And I was like, what? I don't want,
Wow.
that's so scary.
What a thing to say.
I know. And again, Gina was like, you're going to be fine. Like, she talked me off the ledge so many times. She was like, just listen to your body. And so I did start to push. But at that point, I did feel really exhausted. And I remember us trying to get me in different positions, and I would stay there for like a little bit, but I didn't. Unfortunately, I feel like the only place I felt comfortable was on my back just because I was so tired. And I think that did kind of like slow the pushing process down because I pushed for 2.5 hours and that sucked. I remember being like, please get this baby out. Yeah, like I can't do this anymore.
Please get out.
But then I finally pushed him out and they placed him on my chest, and they were really great about letting him stay there. I mean, he was there for over an hour. He even latched within that first hour, and I got that amazing time with him, and it was the best feeling in the world.
So towards the end of your pushing, I don't know if you remember this, I could see him like trying to rotate underneath your pubic bone. Then he would like suck back in. And I was like, all right, we're going to go ahead and just get this going. And I got you into a half lunge. And
you did?
And you were probably like, what is this woman doing? So I had you get into a half lunge position and you pushed there like twice. When you flip back over, he came out that next push. So you're welcome.
I literally don't remember any of that.
Gina tells this story to me all the time, and she's just like, I'm not trying to take credit for it, but like it was the lunch. And I was like, or she just like pushed the baby out herself. Like,
no, Gina got my baby out for sure.
There's no way you can take the credit.
I'm not taking the credit, but I do use that as an example in our childbirth ed course when I explain, like, if your baby is just rocking and rocking and rocking under the pubic bone, get into a lunge, like left leg forward, shift your hips back, it's going to open that space, and it worked for you. So you're my claim to fame.
Okay, I love knowing that because in my mind, I was just laying there like pretty much starfish style, like, please. Someone get this child out.
Yeah, no, I had you flipping all over the place. But yeah, the lunge was just kind of the last little thing that he needed. Once you flip back over, like the next push, he was crowning and emerging from your body.
Yeah. See, it's crazy that's just like proof that when you are in labor, you do go into like another world, because I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Yeah, it's been pretty. We just did another birth story with another one of my doula clients, and the same thing kind of happened where I gave some background info that they didn't even realize had happened. So I think sharing all these birth stories is going to be really fun with my doula clients to be like, oh yeah, by the way, this happened. Did you remember?
Nope. I love it.
So was it worth having an unmedicated birth? Because that was something that when I was having my home birth, I really was like thinking in my head was the things that people who had unmedicated births were saying about how it was worth doing. So was having an unmedicated birth worth all of that to you?
100%. Like, I have no regrets, no complaints. I mean, I've said some things about my nurse at the time, but 100% I would do it. I mean, like 5 minutes after he was on my chest, I was like, I want to do that again. It was so empowering, enlightening. I don't have the words to explain the way that it makes you feel when it's over. So 100%.
I have like chills just thinking about that feeling myself.
Yeah, it's wild.
So what were some things that contributed towards a really positive experience for you that you would definitely replicate in a future pregnancy and birth?
I think just becoming like informed, like doing that research and putting in the work and mentally preparing is what kind of contributed to me having a positive experience. I tell women all the time, like friends and people that I know that are pregnant, like, I don't care what kind of birth you want to have. I don't care if you want to have a completely unmedicated birth at home or if you want to go into a hospital with an elective induction with an OB. It doesn't matter to me, but you have to do your research and make informed decisions so that when those plans might change, you feel empowered and there's less room for birth trauma because, I mean, it's happening to women all the time. People want to go into birth and just wing it. And unfortunately, I feel like that can be really detrimental. So I felt nervous going into my induction, but I also felt relatively prepared and ready to accept what might come my way because of it, because I felt knowledgeable.
Is there anything that you would change about how you prepared for birth or things that happened during your birth?
I do wish that I had paid a little bit more attention to like transition and becoming more informed about that because like I said, I was freaking out on the inside. And I've told my husband, like, next time when if you see me start to act like that, I need someone to tell me this looks like transition, like you're so close, you're safe. I just felt like that's what I needed to hear. Like, no, this is okay. This is how it's supposed to be. You're almost done. And I think that would have helped me like stay calm and more centered during that moment in birth.
Hopefully you'll be able to recognize it in your next birth that I'll be there for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hiring myself.
No, you're going to be there for sure.
So what advice do you have to our listeners who may be in a similar situation as you? Like for someone who's finding out that they need an induction and they're wanting an unmedicated birth, like what tips do you have for them?
I mean, I feel like I'm probably beating a dead horse when I say this, but just research, do your research, just prepare, write up you don't even have to call it a plan, but your preferences, hire a doula. Oh my gosh. I think people a lot of times think that doulas are just for unmedicated births, but they're not. Like there because they have knowledge and they're there to specifically advocate for the mother. And so, yeah, just get informed, do your research, hire a doula, and get excited because it's going to be beautiful and fabulous.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your birth story with us and with your
Thank you.
followers. Thank you for allowing me to be there as well and support
Of
you
course.
in person and for all your future babies. I'm excited to be there too.
I know. I can't wait. Soon. Not yet, but definitely soon.
You have my number.
I will.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a great evening.
Of course. Thank you. Bye, y'all. Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode. If you want more support throughout your pregnancy, join our prenatal fitness programs and childbirth education course. If you need more support after birth, join our postpartum fitness program and education courses. If you are a professional, we offer birth worker and fitness trainer courses so you can learn more from us while earning CEUs. Explore all of our courses on our website at MamasteFit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast to be notified when we release new episodes. Leave a review, share with your friends. We release new episodes every Wednesday and new birth story episodes every Friday. The MamasteFit Podcast Birth Story Friday episodes are sponsored by Balbay, a perinatal clothing company that supports your pregnancy, birth, and beyond with their expertly curated support wear garments. Use code MamasteFit for 15% off your order.